Carl Windsor, our head of engineering. We're going to have another meeting in Delta tomorrow, and we'll go through the team a little bit more. But we started in July of 18, and this spill happened before we got there. One of the things that Brad, the previous CEO, did say was that he called Dave on the phone, Baumgarten, I think before even COGCC. So one of the things that Brad was great about, because he's got 15 years of time, was to work with the county. So that was obviously a learning curve for us. But what happened here was there were two spills off of risers, off of the pipeline on the water line. No hydrocarbon, it was produced water. One of them were caught with the drone.
Yes.
And the other one wasn't. We obviously submitted all the information, the timeline. COGCC looked at it. They wanted us to repair both risers. We looked at every single riser across the entire, I think, 30 miles of pipeline water lines that we've got. We went forward and actually replaced them or repaired all of them, just to plan for the future. So this is just a prelude for. We had about 150 slides. We don't have that much time tonight. So we've dropped this to about 50 slides or so. Go ahead,
it's a lot of pictures, don't worry.
Yeah, it's a lot of pictures. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, just speak up. It sounds good though.
Okay. So yeah, no, it's a great intro, Solar. Like you kind of mentioned, we came in the middle of last year, and the latest of these two spills had just happened a few months prior to our joining the team. So it was kind of a working backwards from what had happened, reactively instead of being proactive, which is where we're at today. So yeah, slide one, I'm assuming you guys are able to look at it. The outline, I'm going to give you guys kind of a little bit more of a detailed overview of the executive summary. And then really in detail walk you through the narrow spill, which is the more recent spill. And then kind of recap the DGU spills. Well, there's two separate water spills that we had, but probably just cover that one in a lot less detail because it's roughly the same process for both of them that we went through. Speak through the failure, like the solution on how to mitigate it, root cause, all that kind of stuff, and then the actual execution of the work, and then the final result. So you guys a clear picture of what happened, why, and then what we actually fixed. So I'll just jump into it real quick. So slide two, executive summary. Bottom line is we've done a very extensive set of operational changes to the field to be proactive, not reactive, and above the COGC regulations, just to make sure that we feel comfortable with how it should be handled, not just meeting the letter of the law. So those two images on the right, the top one is the DGU spill, a picture of it, and we have a ton more to visually kind of elaborate on that. And then the bottom one is the narrows. So the DGU spill, these both happened within 3 miles of each other on the same portion of the infrastructure we have in what we like to call our southeastern portion of the fields, and it's DGU Dead Man Gulch Federal Unit. The DGU spill was about 50 barrels of water that spilled, and it's kind of a sad rationale as to what happened. But simply put, there was an open valve that got knocked open physically, and that's why it had the leak. It's been 100% cleaned up. We've done the full field-wide riser repair that Bard mentioned, and gotten through all the regulatory stuff with the COGCC. We spent about $71K on the cleanup itself, and then we paid an incremental fine of about $203,000 to the state. But up to this point, it's been fully resolved. We'll jump into details on that one. The other one was the narrows, again, directionally about 2 miles north on the same infrastructure system on the water line, and it was about a 10-barrel spill of just pure produced water. Like Solar mentioned, there's no hydrocarbons at all that was spilled out. And this one was actually a mechanical failure. There was a riser, a vertical tube that comes off of the water line itself that relieves gas pressure in the water line, and it failed. And again, we fully mitigated that and cleaned it up. We spent a little under $100,000 cleaning that one up, and then paid $145,000 fine to the state for that one. And again, we'll jump into the details about it. The main actions taken that were required by the COGC are fairly straightforward and obvious, but just to be clear about them, it's essentially to treat all the soils that were damaged and to replace and fix any of the impacts to the surface area with regards to vegetation and landscape and that sort of thing. There's now a requirement with the state to do regular inspections of pipelines. So that's something we're doing. And then essentially to get resolution with the COGCC to report the spill, to get the fine, the NOAB, and to take action based on that. So that's what happened that the COGC required. What we ended up doing was a little bit above and beyond that. So we actually did a full audit of our pipeline and our riser system. So just think about getting all of the details and information about every single riser and every single piece of pipe. So we understood what we had in the field, and then to do an exhaustive review of what to do to make it non-likely to fail. We also spent a little over $100 grand on fixing all of the risers above and beyond all the dollar amounts you guys see up there. What we essentially did, like the Flar said, is we proactively redid all the risers, regardless of the likelihood of failure, to be a consistent setup that is nothing in the world foolproof, but probably just one notch below it, pretty much foolproof in terms of being able to have any of these issues or anything remotely related to leaks and mechanical failures. And then finally, we basically put in a set of standard operating procedures, both in the unfortunate event if we ever have a spill again, the process to handle it, and as well how we're going to maintain and mitigate the pipelines moving forward. So we kind of put these standard procedures in place. We're still fanning this out in more detail, but we at least have those first pieces put together. This year, we plan on elaborating on that and being a little bit more robust on how we do that. So that's kind of a high level. Again, I'm going to jump into the narrows with a lot of details, so stop me if I'm going too fast or too slow. So the narrow spill, like I kind of mentioned, was likely caused by a valve connection breaking. And it was roughly in the first to second quarter of 2018 when that occurred. And again, it was off of a 6-inch water line. And it was on the GE side of our pipeline. We have a gas and water pipeline, and this is on the water leg of that system. Theoretically, this happened actually on the surface of SG, our operating partner to the east. Their federal unit is called Bull Mountain, and technically this happened just on the other side of our federal unit, DGU, Denman Gulch unit, and on their side of the road. Nick Hughes was the surface owner that this impacted, and like I had shared, it was roughly 10 barrels, and it covered about 3,000 square feet of contaminated soil. So we essentially caught it in May through our drone inspection. And I have a video of it, but it's way too large of a file size to physically share, so I would maybe follow up to you guys later and share with you on the thumb drive. But the drone caught it in May, and we basically mitigated it between May and August of this year, this prior year, sorry, and just did the full execution of the plan. And I'll walk through that in detail with y'all in terms of what that specifically means, but this is basically the chronology of what happened in October through November. We basically did our design fix above and beyond the May to August mitigation that the COGCC required, and then in December we had a final set out with the COGCC and got resolution of it. So if you go to slide 5, the kind of the who, what, where, when, why, like we're sharing who's Gunnison Energy's water pipeline on Nick Hughes' land and Dan Hawker. Dan's our field foreman, and Hawker was the contract operator running the drones because we didn't have licenses at the time to do so. So that's who found this. And what, like I had mentioned, it's a ball valve off of the water leg of the system that caused the 10 barrels to spill roughly in a 20 by 115 foot stretch of stuff. Where, like I said, Bull Mountain, there's a red arrow down the bottom right map that shows specifically where it is. All those weird shapes and colors is essentially Gunnison's acreage, with the exception of that green colored acreage. That's essentially SG's Bull Mountain acreage where slide 6, it just highlights where it was happened again in a little bit more detail. If you jump to slide 7, we have regular drone inspections in place. And what was very, very unfortunate is that when we did the inspection on March of 2018, the orange is where our drone was able to physically get to and cover the pipeline. The just gray, smaller, thin line is where the drone was not able to go, and it was just due to weather in March. As you guys know, it was a pretty snowy, muddy month, and we just physically could not get access to certain portions of the pipeline. And unfortunately, this leak literally happened, as you can see down there, where there's a gap of orange, is where that nerve spill happened. So it unfortunately went over the one spot we didn't get a drone over. Like I said, Hawker noticed the actual failure, and Dan went out to work with it. And if you go to slide 8, you'll see what we're able to do now, which is just full coverage of our pipeline with the drone. And on slide 8, it kind of shows that that's when we picked it up in May instead of March when we do these quarterly inspections. Slide 9 shows you the actual riser leak spill area. This is obviously after we found it, we started to excavate it. As you can see, the pipe to the left on slide 9 is a water riser, and it's just a 2-inch tubing valve that comes up out of the 6-inch horizontal pipeline that's below the dirt there. And on the right of that is the gas riser. And so each pipeline has a riser to take out the phase that's not supposed to be there. So in an instance of the water pipeline, we have a 2-inch gas riser coming off of it to bleed off the gas from the system. And then the opposite for the gas line. There is a 2-inch water line coming off of it to bleed off the water. There's pretty much no issues ever with the gas side of it, just due to the low volume of water in the gas system. But on the water leg, it's a lot more susceptible to failures and freezing, and that's pretty much what happened. If you go to slide 10, it's just visually showing you where it happens, so you get a sense of it topography-wise. If you go to slide 11, it's a zoom in of that same stuff, and on the right, you can actually see the little box where the actual riser was and where it spilled. And on the left is some of the environmental consulting we did with Entrada, where they basically take all the measurements of the topography and they figure out what the impacts are and how to mitigate it. So if you jump to slide 12, these are just visuals to show you what the spill looked like when we caught it. So the left image shows you the downslope where the leak happens and obviously the adverse impacts to the vegetation. It's essentially a little salty water. If you look at the chemical composition of water it's just produced, it just has a higher set of chlorine and TDS in it. So it's just salty water, and obviously the vegetation likes a little bit of pressure water, and that's why it kills off the vegetation. Slide 13 is another view looking downslope. The left one is immediately finding the issue, and the right one is a little bit later when it dried up a little bit. Slide 14 actually shows you the actual valve and the actual failure. So that valve on top there, that rusted looking metal piece of iron, is a ball valve that essentially lets you open and close it if you want to bleed off water out of the system. And that's essentially where the failure occurred. Slide 15 shows you that failure in a lot more detail. And if you actually just want to jump to slide 16, it shows it in as much detail as you can get. Essentially, the threads for the connection between the 2-inch riser and the ball valve itself, the baseline ball valve, literally froze and split the mechanical seal of the connection to the ball valve itself. So that's where it failed, and we'll walk through the how and why, the kind of root cause failure analysis. I just want to give you a sense of what that looked like. Slide 17 is kind of the before when we came on location, and slide on the right is essentially the after, showing you what it should have looked like. And it's a small nuance. It's obviously just tilted left a little bit where it cracked. So if you go to slide 18, now that we've kind of identified the failure and what happened, we kind of went through the key stakeholders, and this is a part of our standard operating procedure, is to, mitigate what happens and why. We essentially have a series of contractors, Hawker with the inspections and the design fixes. High Country did most of the man labor to get it actually cleaned up in Strata. And ALS were the two different environmental groups that did the soil/water sampling to ensure that no water impacts happen and that sort of thing. And we'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but in short, this is obviously a really bad thing to happen, and we're not pleased that we joined the team with these issues, but the benefit of it, or the positive note, was it wasn't by any major water sources at all, so nothing was impacted related to anything besides the soil that we did impact. Obviously, the regulatory bodies, BLM, CGCC, and then in this case, because it happened in Gunnison County, Gunnison County, McHughes, and then our team. So those are the major stakeholders we identified in the process. Slide 19 through 21 are essentially the chronology of what happened. And I can go into this in more detail, so apologize if I go too quickly through it, but it essentially starts on slide 19 for the chronology with May, the leak identified, and basically go to find everybody within the first 24 to 48 hours. Immediately after that, you basically get samples of soil to do a control group, and then a contaminated group, and then you essentially have to take the soil contaminated and bring it back up to snuff from the control group that wasn't impacted. So the month of May and June, what we essentially did was start cleaning it up and filing the proper regulatory permits, so not permits, I apologize, but the regulatory paperwork with the COGCC. So we filed the Form 27, basically saying what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Form 19 is essentially the beginning of that sampling process, and I'll show some slides on that. It says, hey, this is our baseline that we have to fix the soil back to. If you go to slide 20, it's just kind of elaborating on the process. We essentially had COGCC out several times throughout the process to monitor our mitigation efforts and our cleanup efforts. We ended up pulling out about 600 tons of soil to an environmental soil disposal site, continue to take samples and clean it. Again, like Solar mentioned, roughly in July is when we joined the team, and I got brought up to speed about all this stuff. And essentially, it's just a series of scraping the dirt off, cleaning it up, and then testing it. And we went through 2 rounds of that through July, and then into August. And then we basically got the thumbs up from the COGCC in August that it was all cleaned up and back to code. And we ended up doing our much more intensive mitigation that we'll go through here in a bit more detail. It goes way beyond just cleaning up the incident itself, but proactively changing our business operations to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. We essentially spent October through December doing that, and then meeting with the COGCC to show them not only the standard requirements, but what we had done above and beyond to make sure this never happened again. Slide 22 is an important, it's just showing the cost of what we did. Slide 23 is the same thing, but this is defined with the state. Slide 24 is where we're going to get into the actual cleanup effort and what we did. Slide 25 just simply shows the procedure. I'm happy to get into this with you guys a little bit more, but it's kind of just the algorithm if, God forbid, we ever have a spill again of what we do and how we do it, so that everybody's wildly clear and that we can improve upon the process. Slide 26 is going to now get into the details of what the environmental work we worked with Entrada on. What they essentially do is they lay out the water wells, and to make sure that we don't have anything within a certain distance. As you can see here, nothing within a mile radius hit the radar except for obviously our own oil and gas wells. So it was immediately determined that there was no impact to any water sources from a water well perspective. Slide 27 highlights the wetlands and the soil buckets setups. And essentially all Entrada's doing with these is getting these baselines of what water sources are where, and if we impacted them in any way whatsoever. And as you can see here, again, nothing with even a quarter mile was impacted at all. So we were at a very, very safe distance reservoir samples up to code. So slide 29 essentially shows you that. It's a ton of stuff on the slide, but just know that each one of the rows represents a chemical, and the ones that are highlighted in yellow do not meet the COGC regulations in terms of the quality of the soil, and they also aren't meeting the control point that I had shown on the previous slide. So it's kind of a combination of the soil is just not okay, period, and the soil is not the same as the control sample site. So what we do is we clean it and remove it essentially through time. And if you go to slide 30, you essentially see that the left side shows early time and the right side shows late time. The yellow cells are the cells that highlight a chemical that's not meeting the criteria. And then through time, as we sample it and we keep removing stuff, we get all the soil samples back to those specs. So essentially, Entrada's in charge of that, and Gunnison, the COGCC has to sign off on it. So we're really not involved with it. We just do the work. The environmental third-party group dictates it's good, and then they share it with the COGCC, and then the COGCC ultimately blesses that mitigation. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of a busy slide, but it's fairly straightforward in terms of just trying to get stuff clean.
How's the timing?
So,
do we have about 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry, Carl, I'm just asking the timing of the room.
I would say 5 more minutes. That gives us time for some Q&A, and then we want to save 10 to 15 minutes.
I literally can't hear.
You have 5 more minutes, Carl.
Should we hit the root cause or the standard operating procedure? What should we hit up the last 5 minutes? Do you want to hit up the? I guess I'm not sure if we need to go through the other spill in more detail, but do you want to get to the conclusion maybe, Carl?
Yeah, you're super funny. I think you said do I want to kind of speed it up to get to the results?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. No, I can definitely do that. There's only 18 slides left of content. So visually, as you can see on slide 31, it's just us mitigating the soils. Slide 32, I won't get into this in detail, but we do kind of a 7 hows, 5 whys, and it's just basically trying to determine why it failed and how. And going through this in a lot of detail on slides 32 and 33, the ultimate conclusion is that it failed from water getting into the 2-inch riser and causing the valve to crack. And actually, it's the valve thread to crack. So that's the simple dimple on what we did. And again, we spent a lot of engineering time trying to do that root cause to get to that point. So that's pretty much it related to the narrow spill. What happened and all that kind of stuff. Slide 34, this is just starting off into the DGU one. I won't go into this one in a lot of detail, but essentially it was the same kind of failure, but it was earlier in time. It was in 2017, and it happened about 2 miles south of where the narrow spill was, and it was on the same waterway line as the other spill was. If you go to slide 36, that directly shows you that, where it happened and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, it's happened on John Hotchkiss's land, and it was in our acreage, in our DGU area, and it was the same kind of saltwater spill. Slide 37 is just showing that we do regular pipeline tests, and that it passed previously, so we didn't notice the failure then. So those are the 2 spills and what happened. Slide 39 is basically walking you guys through the fix of that. So we essentially looked at our entire field and did an audit to understand what we had and where and what the composition was. Just know that we had 22 locations that had risers in them, and there were 18 risers for the water line. That's clearly the weak point, or was the weak point in our system. So we essentially documented all the different types we had. Looking at slide 40, we basically went, okay, we have all these different types of risers in all these different places. Slide 41 kind of shows you what they look like, just so you can get a sense of the slide showing the green underneath the dirt there is the 6-inch water line, and then that piece of iron coming out of it, that's the riser. We just understood the composition of the field in terms of the mechanical natures of each different valve setup. Slide 42 just highlights what that looks like. I won't walk you guys through all the different valve types, but the bottom line is we documented what the valves were and how all the risers were set up, and we decided to move to a standard setup. So if you move to slide 43, we essentially went through all the options in the world, more than the ocean, if you will, on how to fix them and how to fix them right. And slide 44 just shows you what an example is from our neighbor to the east, SG. And slide 45 shows you cathodic protection that we already had, but we're installing more of, and it really just helps protect the line from any classical corrosion of the metal itself. So slide 46 just shows after we thought through all this stuff and spent a lot of time, we came up with a right way to do it. Any solution was identified, and it's as Lard mentioned, we just decided to unilaterally replace all of the riser setups so that there isn't any ability for it to fail the way it did at all anymore in 100% capacity. Slide 48 basically just shows you the execution of it. We decided to dig up all the risers and to replace shut the valve at the base of the line so the water can't get into them. And for a majority of them, we decided to put valve cans around them to protect them from freezing and from anybody physically hitting them or breaking them again. Slide 49 just kind of shows you that infrastructure system. Slide 50 highlights the actual audits of the pipeline and the risers itself. And then slide 51 kind of shows you the designs and what that final product ends up looking like. And it's pretty simple. It's just a 2-inch riser that has a valve and then a double set of protection for it to fail, which is a lock-on valve so that it can't be opened, and then a thread valve, needle valve connection on the top of it so that it's dual redundancy. And below the surface is where we also shut them in with another valve. So there's basically 3 sets of valves and/or stop gaps in place so that there pretty much can't be any failures. We essentially did the project and executed it on slide 52, and all it's showing you is the green circles are where we dug up the riser and we put a valve can around it. The blue circles are where we dug it up and we just closed the valves, so that again there's this triple redundancy on water leakage. And the red ones are where we didn't do anything, simply because they're gas lines that have no water in them at all. So there's clearly no ability to have a water spill in those. Slide 53 is just the drums that we're doing now. Jessica is a certified pilot for drums. And so she is proactively going out on a regular basis related to our operations to inspect the line. To me, this is a little bit more reactive than proactive. The rest of the work we did was the proactive part, but we are still going to do this part as well, kind of concurrently with major operations. Slide 55 just basically walks us through the execution of the project and what we did. Slide 56 shows you what the heck I'm talking about. Slide 56 is a guard barrier around the riser, a valve can protecting the water and the gas, and the left side with the little orange cone on top is the cathodic protection for that entire system, so that that wasn't a part of the failure, but that was a part of our solutions to make sure we were protecting the line as much as we could. So essentially slide 56 shows you a finished product. Slide 57 is the exact same thing, except this is an instance where we did not put a valve can around it just because we don't plan on using this specific location very much. And the only difference between the two is that the previous slide is more accessible to operate the valves, but they're both mechanically set up the exact same way, where there's a dual redundancy on the valves, both below grade and above grade, so that nothing can fail. And then slide 58 is just visually showing you on the top left the actual valve setup. It's our standard for the field now. It's the lock valve and threaded needle valve connection. The upper right hand image is just showing them installing the actual riser connection and doing the cathodic protection. And then the bottom right image is essentially showing you what the cathodic protection looks like, just to give you some visuals of what the final product
I know Carl mentioned the mitigation through drones that Jessica's now running. Maybe make a few comments, Jessica, about how we're gonna be going above and beyond and do it quite often.
Yes, so we're not only gonna do it, just quarterly or what have you for pipeline inspections, but also when we have active operations, if we're doing any kind of pipeline testing, flow testing, things like that, I'll also be out there to make sure that we have eyes on all the ground as much as possible while anything else is happening.
And when she goes out, there's typically myself or someone else, so there's several eyes
Mm-hmm.
looking, driving, and surveying. So just wanted to make that comment.
And so what are you looking for, or what is the drone picking up?
So it's just a visual inspection of the pipeline routes. Majority of our pipelines are co-located with roads, so we do have field personnel that are on those roads daily. So they also do a daily inspection, but the drone assists us in areas where you can't drive, where it might go cross-country or roads that we don't typically access.
So when you're looking at that drone footage, you're manually looking for,
Yes, we manually look for
items?
something out of the ordinary.
you don't do change detection with prior footage?
And I apologize if I'm talking over anybody, the hearing's a little difficult, but what's really important to me is that what we're gonna be doing going forward that really hasn't been done is we're gonna be doing regular pressure tests of our entire system, both the gas and the water side. So doing a regular drone inspection is gonna be helpful, but I think it's gonna be the most critical for us is just to physically test the system every year when we do major operations to ensure that there's mechanical integrity throughout the system.
Did that answer your question, Natasha?
No, I was just curious as to whether you do change detection from prior footage.
What exactly is that?
That's software on imagery
Oh, it's a
analysis?
specific software?
Yeah,
I haven't heard it, we can look into
We
it.
can look into that, yeah.
I mean,
haven't-
especially for areas where it's not accessible, it would be helpful if you actually have that.
We'll look into that, cause, yeah.
An algorithm, it just can see it can see a difference, and then
So it's software that basically detects any changes from the previous imagery. It's an imagery analysis software. eCognition is one of them.
that's a great idea.
But yeah, just to emphasize what Carl's saying there, we're gonna test the system next year, so that's very important. So we'll have comfort very soon that everything tests well.
So it seemed like you did pretty extensive soil testing in the area, and you mentioned that you identified the existing groundwater infrastructure in the area, and determined there's no threat to the groundwater. Did you do water sampling concurrent with this spill?
Gunnison Energy has had a very robust groundwater sampling program throughout the whole project area for over a decade, so. So yes, I think there were samples pulled, we have plenty of samples from before as the baseline, and I think samples were pulled afterwards.
Did you notice any changes throughout the?
Not that I'm aware of.
I have a question. May I ask a question?
Sure.
I was a little confused there. Carl said it was in the produced water that it was mostly just high in salt, maybe a little chlorine, but I saw on one of the slides that the reason the soil was removed is that it was tested high for diesel organics.
Can you hear that, Carl?
Can you repeat the question? I apologize. I heard something about soil sampling slide.
In the soil sampling, there, it did test, some of it did test positive for diesel organics.
Yeah, I can. That's like super choppy. I'm sorry. One lady was talking. I could hear her really well earlier, but
Carl, she was asking on some of those results on the soil samples that one of those tests had diesel organics. That obviously was, I guess, one of the orange or yellow highlighted sections up there. Is that from the chemicals from the CBM wells, or?
yeah. So that actual with the diesel, it's basically that they sensed oil is what that kind of indicates. And honestly, I can't speak to exactly what it represents. It could be from a multitude of things, but I feel like based on the fact that if you look at diesel on there, it like tested really high for the first time we did it, and then every subsequent test, it was immediately really low. It kind of just feels like a bit of an anomaly in terms of what showed up. But yeah, I can't speak to exactly what that represented when it came out in that soil sample. Just because we weren't really involved with this in the beginning.
But it wasn't from the formation, because the diesel wouldn't be from the rock.
No, it's something, it's a truck, it's something like that, because we don't make any, hydrocarbons in this area, it's just gas and water.
It'd be from the connection or something physically from, that got into the line possibly, that was from the wells, downstream, upstream.
So the produced water does
Yeah, it's
contain,
a good theory, I'm not sure, wouldn't wanna try to apply.
It doesn't contain oil from the rock, but there is
It's-
the hydrocarbon
right,
bearing, like gunk
Like
sometimes you put
like
on the.
grease or something like that?
Yeah, it could be grease, it could be anything in that,
Mhm.
that world.
Yeah, but the water essentially, or the soil is essentially tested high in the very, very beginning, like you saw there, for the diesel and organics, but really it's the sodium is just salty, and it got mitigated down. I don't know if that answers the question.
Any other questions from our group?
I guess, so is all of the infrastructure just Gunnison Energy infrastructure, or is it shared with SG?
Most of it is Gunnison, there is spurs that we share.
And so the standard operating procedure that you now developed on this, is that going to be applicable to those spurs with SG? How are you coordinating on that?
I've got meetings with SG. Right now, it's our operation, what we operate, so that's what we're implementing, but we're sharing that right now with SG.
We're gonna work on putting a bridging document together so that we're aligned. But right now, we're setting, since we're new to this company, we're setting our own policies and procedures, and the next step is to bridge with them.
We're working on that now.
Where's Elise?
Right.
Is Dave Baumgartner still on the line?
Probably, he's on mute, let me unmute him.
While you're doing that, Solar, can we get a copy of the presentation since you
Yeah,
went
let me
through
take
it so
some of the numbers
fast?
out though, since some of that was COGCC and some of it, but we will provide it.
That's great.
And
David, you're on, we've got a question for you.
My question would be,
All right.
did Gunnison County find that the response was adequate?
The question is, did you find that the response to the spill was adequate? And I think earlier, the question was, how were you guys informed of, and what did that notification process look like? That was a previous question before we started.
So, the answer to the first question is yes. The second is we were notified two different ways, one by the company and the second was by the COGCC. And the information that each provided was consistent with the other.
What would he have done different, if anything?
Would you guys have done anything differently on this?
I'm sorry, please?
Would you have done anything differently on this?
No.
No.
Thank
Anything else? Alright. This was really helpful. We as a working group have had the conversation of how does that process work? How do you ensure that there's follow-up and cleanup? So just having an example to look at is very helpful, I think. Natasha?
Since Wendell asked the question of David in terms of what Gunnison County would have done differently, and I know you're a new team, but what would you have done differently?
Well, none of this is an excuse, but obviously we were getting our bearings for the first 3 months. We would have probably had way better mapping, lat and longs, exactly where the pipe is, what the size of the pipe is, how long it was installed. That's something that I've run a lot of operations, I would know, and we'd have AutoCAD or some type of a drawing that was detailed. That's something we probably would have done up front and had that set aside. But also probably the pressure testing is probably something that we would do more often as well. There's an element of balance between if you're not operating much, you don't potentially test as much, but that's really not the excuse. We need to test regardless because weather changes, things happen. So probably different, just standard operating procedure and the data up front. because we were in data gathering phase for 3 months. What did we have? Where are the valves? What's below the ground? We didn't know that. So that was the part that we should have had up front. That's what we would have done differently, not only in the installation, but also on the standard, quarterly testing or whatever else.
I'm glad you brought up the mapping piece, because that's something we bring up consistently, is that the mapping on this is inadequate.
I think Elise or maybe Robbie, and I think maybe David at some point, I'm not sure if they've really seen all the pipeline maps before, and that's why we're trying to just show what we've got out there. I think we pretty much know everything now and where every valve is and all of that, but that's something that obviously we're going to be giving to the county, which I don't think before they had.
And to be clear, that mapping's on all pipelines, not just on produced water lines?
The gas and water line, where the water is always where the gas is, in some way, shape, or form, but the gas, there's about 20 additional miles of gas lines, and that'll be mapped as well. Which is mainly the stuff to the north that he showed.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. So we can go back to our table if you want, or we can continue to sit here, it doesn't matter, but our last few minutes were really to take community input, and Sandra's the only one here, so, but I think this is just an opportunity to talk about more broadly. Sandra, if you've got anything else to add, or if you've got another question or two, and then I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about our next meeting to make sure we're all on the same page. Do we want to go sit back down at the table? Or do you want to do it from here? Everyone looks comfy, so, all right. So, Lysandra, do you have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I thank you very much for offering public comment and also for the presentations, very illuminating. I was intrigued by Mr. Baumgartner's comments. Not once, but twice, he pointed out that that the regulations should help the applicant move forward, and I agree with that. If you want, to an extent, I mean, we're talking about this in our land use regs. If we want business to come, we need to make it simple and straightforward and clear. However, hearing that twice from him, I didn't hear it in that comment also the concerns of the constituency, the taxpayers. It makes me doubtful, and I don't know Gunnison County at all, but it makes me a little concerned that there's a bit too much industry interest and industry clout there.
Can I ask David to respond to that? Since
Sure.
he's here? Hey, David, so the question is, or maybe the comment, but that when you were talking about Gunnison County's approach, that you talked a lot about making sure to help the applicant through the process, and that we didn't hear anything about what it looks like for the taxpayer, for the concerned constituent. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your process incorporates the community into it, or how it does, if it does?
Sure. I think people who are present in your room might better state what their experience has been. We provide abundant notice, opportunity to comment, and we consider those comments extraordinarily well.
Talk about your,
And I think probably it's better to hear from the people who have made the comment about what their experience has been.
I'm guessing he's referring to me and to CHC, and I have to say that Gunnison County's approach to public comment has been exceptional, and they take them very seriously, follow up with them to ask if any clarification on them, and I think they, at least from my perspective, it appears treats all sides equally. And I can't speak for your side, and I'm guessing you're in touch with them more than we are, but at least from our perspective, the public comment period has been transparent, open, and always seeking clarification. And I hope he was able to hear that.
Natasha said she likes it. that you guys have been good.
That would be a useful one for me to actually hear.
Yeah, so Natasha said that you guys, really take the comments seriously, seek clarification, and, really appear to treat all sides equally. Does that get it?
Nope, can't hear you.
Oh, you didn't hear that?
Not at all.
All right, Natasha said that you guys definitely listen to the comments, take them seriously, seek clarification, and treat all sides equally.
Well, I'll be darned. That's what we want.
I think our process has room for improvement on how we seek comment, for sure. I think that's, and so far we've only, our specific development process itself has room for improvement, and that's what we're following, and I definitely think that's an area for our group to think through is how do we improve that interface?
I will say something else that I really valued with Gunnison County is that the onus wasn't always on us to have to follow up, but they took the initiative to follow up on our comments and say, did we understand this correctly?
Point well taken. All right.
You had another question?
I don't have another question. On that same topic at least, in the master plan process, when the planning commission adopted the master plan to present and move forward with this, there was some conflict over the silent majority that were not really showing up. So that's a discussion I think is worth having a little bit more of. And then as the last quick points I'll make is, as far as produced water, I understand that the list of chemicals are often proprietary, but I think it would be worth, I don't know if other counties have ever done this might be a question for David, is can the operator and the county have a non-disclosure agreement that allows the county to know what the chemicals are that are being used in the event of these issues, and it's not open to the public? I think that would be really great, and maybe other counties do have that apparatus.
Hey, David, another question maybe for you. Do you know of other counties, or does Gunnison County require disclosure of chemicals that are within produced water? Or even through some kind of non-disclosure agreement so that it's not necessarily public, but you know what it is in the event there's an issue?
We do not currently have a non-disclosure agreement.
Absolutely.
I think the state may, but we do not.
I'd love to see that discussed. And I love the visual drone inspections are great, but it would be, if the pipeline can't be inspected in an area, you gotta find a way to inspect it, or I don't think you should have pipeline there. Because, let's face it, mechanical malfunctions are gonna happen. I love these triple prevention measures of the cathoids and all of that. Did I have that right? Anyway, that's great, but 2,000 years from now, the stuff is gonna corrode if it doesn't corrode before then. So the software imagery analysis would be great. I would love to make that recommendation as perhaps a county suggestion or a county reg, and have operators even volunteer that. And then my only last concern is the soil that went to the Adobe Buttes landfill. I'm glad no water sources were impacted, but I suppose you paid fines for that to deposit it there. But that is still hazardous waste that we are dealing with. And that's actually, most of these wells are in Gunnison County, but we're getting the externalities of it because Delta County's roads are the ones that access them. Am I right? Yeah.
This is special way, I should let Carl comment on this, but I think these companies that take it handle it very carefully and combust it, or they get rid of it in a special way. Carl, can you talk about what the contractor does with that soil?
Like in terms of the,
Yeah.
I think what they basically do is a chemical composition of it and then store it, both the baseline and then the subsequent samples we use for the whole thing.
So I think we're talking about the actual disposal of the soil once you cleaned it up and you removed it. Where did it go and what does that process look like?
If that was for me, I apologize, I didn't get it.
This was working so well earlier. All right. We were talking about the actual soil once it was removed. Where did it get disposed of and how does that disposal process work? The concern is it just going to the landfill and creating a new problem at the landfill?
Solar, I can hear you okay. Do you mind repeating that for me? So
Yeah.
sorry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, whenever they did the cleanup, on the dirty soil, and they hauled it away to a facility, do you know what they did at that facility?
I don't, yeah, I don't know what to say. I got full bars here.
Just
but
these
it's-
special companies,
Like, I go to work.
it's a special company that takes
I'm really sorry.
toxic or not only, I guess the
Let's
dirty
follow up on
soil.
that, because I don't know the answer. I kind of want to know myself
But-
exactly what they do on that, so.
I don't wanna misstate and say
No, no,
something they're
But
specifically
it is
doing, but it's a special company
that
that
can
manages.
handle it and has handled such
Yeah.
items in the past,
It-
so.
yeah.
I know, we had done a in situ kind of project at my previous company, and it was, basically like a soil farming, and they put in microbes that ate away the items that we didn't want in the soil to make it clean filter.
It doesn't go out somewhere else, it's managed there, and it's costly.
So is it a hazmat company, pretty much?
So they're licensed with CDPHE to handle that kind of waste.
It's a very specific service they provide, so.
Mike, I saw your hand go up.
Well, in my experience, since the majority of that is saltwater contaminated soil is taken to the dump and dumped. It's, you know, when you talk about the diesel in the water, I had an issue in years past in this county where I hauled water to a tank to run a frack job, and it was fresh water. We took it from the gravel company, we drove it up to an above ground tank, and we never used it. And when I did water samples on it, it had diesel contamination in it. And the reason it had diesel contamination in it is because you have no control over what these water haulers are hauling. They might haul diesel one day, cow manure the next day, whatever. And so here I had a perfectly good water sample that was contaminated by the truck that drove it. So instead of having something I could dispose of with no issue, I had to take it, and that was all liquid, I had to take it to a disposal well after I evaporated it down and hauled it off. But when it's just soil contaminated with salt, that's, you know, your TDS is probably around 4,200.
Most of it's chlorides.
Yeah, and it's all chlorides for the most part, and some bicarbs as well. And that's the bane of the Mancus Shale around here. My irrigation water has a 2,200 TDS, and that's what I grow grass with, you know, so, and there's places that are worse. You take water out of the reservoir in Crawford, and it's got a 30% higher TDS in September than the water that comes out of the mountains in June. So, but, you know, you're putting salty dirt in a place that is known for salty dirt, which is the landfill. Now, if you got, I heard the word toxic, you don't get to put toxic there. You get to put salt contaminated soils in there.
Thank you.
That's why Joby Beach is where it's at.
Anything else? We're right at 7:30 now. So, okay, next meeting. I've got a handout, a reprint